Hello everyone, good evening from Long Island. Here in Module 5, lost count of the days there for a second, it's been a long day. Just to recap, I'm doing my internship with Hope for the Warriors, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to working with post 9/11 veterans who've incurred combat injuries, who have combat incurred injuries. That's the wording that we use. I have been working with intakes. I should be wrapping up next week if they have deemed me able to move on to clinical health and wellness, but that's a whole nother video. For now, we'll stick to what I've been doing. This week, a few exciting things that I learned about the organization that I'm working with, about Hope for the Warriors. For anyone who has experience working with veteran service organizations, you'll be very familiar with the fact that most veteran service organizations have very strict criteria with who is able to utilize their funds. And I understand why VSOs, veteran service organizations, do this. For all of our talk, there actually is very little funding going towards veterans issues, spouses issues, caregiver issues, and especially military children. There's very, very little funding for military kids. And two exciting things that I lost sight of what I was saying. So they're very stringent rules about where the money can go. And Hope for the Warriors is no different, but we do make some very interesting exceptions, which I learned about this week. So before I use the phrase combat incurred injuries. So that is an injury that was incurred while you were deployed to a combat zone. Now we say deployed to a combat zone is anything that was in support on the global war on terror in a hazardous duty zone. But something very exciting that we do is we also count injuries that were incurred when you were training for a deployment. That's pretty unique in this field. Usually it's kind of, oh, you were hurt training for your deployment to Iraq, well, you're shit out of luck. Now you can't deploy, and now you don't qualify for a lot of services, except for your VA benefits. Plus, I guess, but that can be very frustrating when you were hurt in support of the war on terror, but you can't access most of the funds out there for you. But we do. If you were hurt during a deployment cycle, which is the work up to a deployment, that also counts as a combat incurred injury. Another very exciting thing that we do is, I have a lot of experience right now because that's what we're doing in intakes. We are currently working on our spousal caregiver scholarship program. For those of you unfamiliar with the wording, a caregiver is a spouse, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a spouse, a family member who cares for a veteran with service-connected injuries, and that does not need to be combat related. But there actually is a Veterans Affairs Service, there's a definition actually, there's the caregiver status, and you can, just as your veteran receives VA benefits, you can also receive VA benefits. Now the program is being downsized currently, so a lot of the things that I'm dealing with in intakes are spouses who have lost caregiver status, but that's another video, and again, I have digressed. But the exciting thing that I learned this week is, just like money for veterans, there are very strict guidelines, even more so for spouses, because spouses didn't earn their benefits. So there are even more strict rules. Any scholarship that you go for, very few of them can be used for a secondary degree, even if it's a bachelor's that's more transferable. So if you already have a bachelor's or you already have an associate's, again, you're kind of shit out of luck. No scholarships for you. But Hope for the Warriors has no such criteria, which is really exciting. A lot of the women that I'm seeing were people that were turned away from, you know, a dozen different scholarships, but we were the only ones that would consider them because they were working for their masters, Or I had lots of ladies come to me because they were looking for a second bachelor's that was more transferable, because as a military spouse, a lot of things just don't move from state to state very well, and they wanted a job that would move with them. So I guess my video ended up being about something completely different than I had originally intended. I had originally intended to talk about self-disclosure, but I ended up discussing how Hope for the Warriors is doing some very exciting things in the field of veteran service organizations. They're kind of breaking down some pretty tried and true rules about how you do business with veterans and spouses. But I like that Hope for the Warriors is very dedicated to seeing where the need is, and they don't shy away from walking in the opposite direction than everybody else is. So the more I work with Hope for the Warriors, the more excited I am to be a part of their team. So my initial question is completely irrelevant. What new and exciting things did you learn about your organization? Are they the kind of organization that's willing to fight the tide, or are they more middle of the road politically? I guess politically isn't the right word, but middle of the road for organizations of their kind. Excited to hear from you guys. Have a great week.